project. So you're currently in the middle of producing Dayshell's upcoming record. How has the process been so far?
The process has been actually really easy because a lot of artists that I usually work with will come in with ideas, demos, things like that. And typically in those situations, you are thinking of this as like, you know, obviously it's a work in progress. It's sort of a starting point. But Shayley's starting point is like a completely recorded song. And all of the stuff is there, all the vocal parts, all the lyrics are thought out, like the melodies are there. So you're really kind of interacting with a kind of a finished song. And from there, that's a very interesting place to be as a producer because it's sort of like, it's less of a playground in some senses because, you know, if you're working on with a song that is just an idea, it's a huge playground. You can do all kinds of different stuff. You can remove a part completely. That's not really what's happening here. This is more like finding out how to take his basically completed idea and make the best version of it, which is something I'm actually really good at. And I think it's one of the things I'm very good at as a producer is basically creating the ultimate version of the artist. And I think that's why not just Shayley, but many other artists will come to me for that reason. So working with him and him being so, you know, natural with his vocal ability, his sensibilities in terms of like what he wants to do musically is so natural as well. It's just sort of like, cool, I just have to, you know, put a cape on him and have him fly, you know, over the city or whatever, like turn the super, you know, build the superhero out of him, out of what he's doing and present that to people in sort of a bombastic way or a superhero way. So for me, that's fun. And it's the reason why like I took the project.
Awesome. This collaborative effort has been long anticipated by you, Shayley, and his fans. How has it been finally being able to work with Shayley?
Well, you know, working with him on the Of Mice and Men records was an eye-opening experience for me at the time because typically I was used to having some vocalists not so good at their craft. And, you know, I'm not saying that every vocalist needs to be perfect. It's kind of far from the truth. A lot of people that you hear on records are highly manipulated, they're edited, but that's kind of like not much different than going to like a Broadway show or a Vegas show where like everything is sort of like on level 10 or like highly, not plasticized, but everything is just sort of like, wow, that looks incredible. Like, oh, that is highly polished or that's very well produced. That's exactly what record making is supposed to be about. You know, it's not necessarily like, oh, let me hear like what these musicians sound like when they just sit down and perform their song once. That's not what we're doing. We're creating like basically a movie, but it's audio. And Shayley was one of the first people that I worked with where it was like, whoa, you just did a vocal take and out of you came basically the final result. I was very impressed with his ability to basically present the vocals in a sense that was like, wow, this is basically good to use. Like, we don't really need to do much to it. So that gets me excited as a producer because then it's like, we're not focusing on, hey, can we just get this part done correctly? It's more like, let's make this part cool by doing this. And when you work with someone like that, it really opens up the doors to be able to explore the person's capabilities along with like what you are doing as a producer and what you're doing with their art.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's been a long time coming since that day, that first day that I worked with him. Yeah. And a lot of things have changed in our lives, you know, and he's gone on to do other things and I've gone on to do other things. And for us to kind of come back and meet together again and rekindle that same magic in this album is really special, you know, and I hope that people hear that. I hope that people appreciate it.
Totally. So you mentioned before that you see something special in Shayley, even as far back as when you guys recorded Of Mice and Men's first album. Something that sets him apart from other musicians that you've worked with, other musicians that you hear, especially in today's modern music and listening culture. What do you see that sets him apart?
It's crazy to try to explain this into words because I don't quite know how to do that. But the thing that separates Shayley as an artist from anyone else is just the approach to melody, the approach to creativity with the lyrics and the ideas that are formulated in those. It has to just be a special thing that comes from him. It's not something that you see anywhere else. You can't compare him to any other vocalist because he has his own style. You can't compare his melodies to anyone else because they're just the melodies that he comes up with. They're the things that he thinks of.
Right.
I don't know how that works. It baffles me and boggles my brain over and over again too. Like, we were working on a song the other day. We were doing the vocal part, which I have heard before, but then we were doing one of the harmony layers, which I had not noticed. And he went to sing it, and I was like, I would never, ever come up with that harmony in my own mind.
Right.
Like, it would just never happen. I don't know how you did it, and I can not even begin to explain how you would choose those notes, but that's just what he does, and that's what makes him special, and that's what makes his sound something that I think people gravitate towards. It's the reason why he has fans, because he's just got this unique thing about him and his artistry and his music that you're not going to find anywhere else. And of course you can say, oh, it's kind of similar to this or it's kind of similar to that, but it's just similar. It's not the same, or even sometimes not even close to being super similar. So in my mind, he's just a one of a kind, and I don't know how to explain why, but it's special, and I'm glad and grateful to be working on it.
I imagine that allows the experience just to resonate heavily with you as a producer. You know, this has kind of been a long time coming. You've obviously worked with him before with Of Mice and Men, but you've never worked with Dayshell. You know, you've never worked with this band. So I imagine that it must resonate, kind of bearing that in mind as a producer, like having someone as talented and multifaceted as Shayley.
Absolutely. It resonates with me because before, when working with him with Of Mice and Men, it was like, okay, he's just sort of the vocalist in the band and you know, the bass player or what have you. But now it's like this is all him. The drums are him. The guitar is him. The vocal melodies, the chords, the song, the structure, the lyrics, everything is him. And that's been a nice journey for me to discover that other side of him that I haven't seen in Of Mice and Men. To see the sensibilities of the song structures and how the chords and the melodies work together. That wasn't always his doing in prior bands, and now with Dayshell it is. And kind of being able to get my hands on it. I don't know if people know this, but like, I'm a huge fan of Dayshell. My wife is a huge fan of Dayshell. She won't like admit it, but she's like fangirling, you know, over the fact that we're like working on this together. And so it's really cool. And it's also challenging because as a producer, when you are a fan of the stuff that you're working on, it can be tough to discern what am I liking just because I'm a fan, or what is the thing that I should objectively approach, like from a production standpoint. Right. So it's tough, but it's a challenge in that regard. But because of how special this is, that's what makes it so great. Yeah. Well, hey Joey, thank you so much for the time. It's awesome just hearing your side of things when it comes to the production and just being able to work with someone like Shayley. I know that it's been a collaboration that's long anticipated by you, by Shayley, by his fans, just everyone involved. Do you have any final words or thoughts as it relates to just everything surrounding this experience? Let's see. Well, the one thing that I feel has been sort of a shortcoming for Dayshell's albums in the past has been sort of the sonic landscape of what it is, like how the drums sound, or how the mix is, or the master, or whatever. And you know, there's lots of different people that have worked with Dayshell in the past. And I guess one of the things that I look forward to the most is kind of finally creating that album sound that I think Shayley wants to hear, that I think Shayley's fans want to hear, that I definitely want to hear. And that's exciting for me, not just as a producer, but as a fan. And so I think, you know, that's something that's really great to look forward to, is to finally have an album that is big, bold, aggressive, in your face, and presenting the material in a way that is going to last for decades and decades. So yeah, my final words are just get ready, because it's gonna blow your mind. Awesome. Thank you very much for the time. Cool, thanks.